memories. Stars above, stories that vary. Heroes rise where the wild winds stand. Tales of Texas, the heart of this land. Ride with me through the pass so bold. Battles fought and legends told. Texas history where the brave took a stand. It's the tales of this great land.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to Tales of Texas History, where we bring the bold and dramatic stories of our past to life. I'm your host, and today we're diving into a fascinating tale of ambition, adventure, and ultimately, failure. The story of the Long Expedition. Picture this. It's 1819, and Texas is a wild frontier under Spanish control. The United States have just acquired Florida, and Mexico was in the midst of fighting Spain for independence. Enter our main character, Dr. James Long, a former U.S. Army surgeon from Virginia, with big dreams and even bigger plans. Now, James Long wasn't your typical doctor. He was what we might call today an adventurepreneur, part soldier, part dreamer, and completely convinced he could carve out his own piece of Texas history. He managed to convince about 200 other adventure seekers to join his cause, and let me tell you, that's quite a recruitment pitch. But here's where it gets interesting. Long wasn't alone in this adventure. His wife, Jane Long, would later become known as the Mother of Texas. Talk about a power couple. They were joined by notable figures like Ben Milam and Long's brother David. They weren't just random folks. They were true believers in the cause. But while James Long was out chasing his dream of Texas independence, it's his wife Jane's story that really captures the spirit of Texas courage. Picture a young woman, just 21 years old and pregnant, left behind at Belvoir Point near Galveston with only her 5-year-old daughter Anne and Klein, her loyal servant. The winter of 1820 was so bitter cold that Galveston Bay froze over. Jane wrote in her diary about those long, lonely nights. The fort was practically empty. All the men had fled except for one sick soldier. But the Carincala Indians didn't know that. And here's where Jane's Texas-sized courage shines through. Every single night, she would fire the fort's cannon at regular intervals, making those Carincala believe that the fort was still fully manned. Can you imagine a pregnant woman loading and firing a cannon every few hours while caring for a child and trying to survive on their last bushel of cornmeal? But wait, it gets even more incredible. On December 21st, 1820, in the middle of that terrible winter, with no doctor or midwife present, Jane gave birth to Mary James Long, the first English-speaking child born in Texas. And y'all, she never missed a cannon firing, even that night. Meanwhile, James Long's expedition had met its fate. Spanish forces captured his group and marched them to Mexico City as prisoners. Long would meet a mysterious end there, never knowing about his new daughter or his wife's incredible courage. Jane held the fort for months, surviving on fish and oysters when they could find them. She turned down numerous chances to leave, believing James would return. By the time she learned of his fate, she had already carved her own place in Texas history. This isn't just a story of a failed expedition. It's a tale of extraordinary courage on two fronts. While James Long's dream of Texas independence may have fallen short, Jane's Long legacy lived on. She became known as the Mother of Texas, and let me tell you, she earned that title through grit, determination, and an unwavering spirit. The Long expedition might have failed, but it left its indelible mark on Texas history. It showed the growing American interest in Texas and previewed what was to come with the Texas Revolution. More importantly, it gave us the story of Jane Long, proving that sometimes the greatest heroes are the ones holding down the fort. Let's watch a video.
What if I told you that Texas declared independence once before 1836, led not by Sam Houston or Stephen F. Austin, but by a restless American adventurer and his wife, who would later be called the Mother of Texas? This is the story of James Long, his bold expedition into Spanish Texas, and the incredible survival of Jane Long, a woman who became legend. It's 1819. The United States has just purchased Louisiana, but Texas still belongs to Spain. Adventurers, smugglers, and dreamers look west with hungry eyes. Among them was James Long, a former U.S. Army surgeon, and restless soldier of fortune. Long believed Texas was ripe for the taking, and that America's destiny was to claim it. He wasn't alone. After the War of 1812, many veterans felt cheated of glory and land. Long gathered a ragtag band of about 300 men in Natchez, Mississippi, farmers, traders, and mercenaries, and declared himself commander of what would become known as the Long Expedition. In 1819, Long's force marched into Texas, seizing Nacogdoches almost without a fight. There, under the shadow of oak trees, they raised a flag, declaring Texas a free and independent republic. But Long's so-called Republic of Texas had shaky foundations. Supplies were short. His men squabbled. Spain was not about to give up its northern frontier. Within months, Spanish troops closed in. Outnumbered and outgunned, Long's forces scattered. He barely escaped with his life. But James Long wasn't finished. In 1820, Long tried again, this time setting up headquarters at Bolivar Point near Galveston. The coastline was wild, windswept, and crawling with smugglers and pirates, including remnants of Jean Lafitte's buccaneers. Jane Long, James' young wife, joined him here, along with their small daughter. She became one of the few Anglo women in Texas at the time. While James plotted alliances with filibusters and Mexican rebels, Jane tried to carve out a home from the salt marshes. But again, Spanish forces crushed the rebellion. James Long was captured and sent to Mexico City, where he was eventually assassinated in 1822. That could have been the end of the story. But Jane Long was about to enter legend. It was the winter of 1821, one of the coldest Texas had seen. Jane Long was left at Bolivar Point with only a few servants, her young daughter, and another child on the way. Supplies were almost gone. The men who had promised to return never did. By December, Jane was alone, a young woman with 2 children on a desolate peninsula, the Gulf winds howling around her. But Jane refused to give in. She loaded a cannon that had been left behind and fired it occasionally to scare off potential raiders. She gathered oysters and fished the bay. She gave birth to her child in that frozen outpost, wrapping the baby in rags to keep her alive. That child, Mary James Long, is often remembered as the first Anglo-American born in Texas. Because of her courage, Texans later called Jane Long the Mother of Texas. Jane Long eventually left Bolivar Point, settling in Richmond, Texas. She lived to see the Texas Revolution, and though she wasn't part of the battles, she became a symbol of perseverance, the woman who held on when everyone else fled. The Long expedition itself failed. James Long's dream of a free Texas ended in blood and betrayal. But his story, and especially Jane's, kept alive the idea that Texas could and should be independent. The Long expedition is often overshadowed by the Alamo and San Jacinto. But in 1819, before Houston, Bowie, or Crockett ever set foot in Texas, a man named James Long declared a republic. And a woman named Jane Long gave it meaning through her survival. So here's the question. Why do we remember the heroes of 1836, but forget the woman who fired a cannon at Galveston and gave birth to Texas's first Anglo child in the dead of winter? Maybe the answer is that legends aren't always made on battlefields. Sometimes they're made by holding on, one frozen night at a time.
Join us next time on Tales of Texas History, where we'll explore another fascinating story from our state's remarkable past. Until then, remember, every piece of Texas history has a tale worth telling, and sometimes the most remarkable stories are written by those who never meant to be heroes at all. This has been Tales of Texas History, and I'm Miss Lovett saying so long, and remember, the best stories are the true ones.